This is the Learning to Lead podcast, episode number 102. What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode number 102 of the Learning to Lead podcast. My name is Doug Smith, and I'm the founder of L3 Leadership. We're a leadership development company devoted to helping you become the best leader that you can be. If you're new to this podcast, we're committed to bringing you 3 episodes each month. One will always be from our leadership breakfast that we host each month, and we'd love for you to attend one. And we bring in the best speakers and leaders that we can find to share their best leadership content. Once a month, I sit down with a leader and interview them and try to extract their best leadership principles. And then once a month, I do a personal leadership lesson that I hope adds value to your life. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, I'd really appreciate if you would leave a rating and review for us on iTunes. That really helps us grow our audience organically, and I always appreciate getting feedback that we're adding value to people. So thank you for that. In advance. This episode specifically is from our interview series. I had the privilege of interviewing Rob Daley, who is the CEO of 4 Moms, which is an incredible company here in Pittsburgh, and I'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute. But before we jump into the interview, I do want to thank our sponsors, BAB Inc., and they are an independent insurance broker, third-party administrator and consulting firm in Pennsylvania and all across the country, and I really love this company. They host our monthly leadership breakfast, and they just do great work all throughout our city, and really want to encourage you to check them out at babbins.com. That's BABBINS.com, and I hope that they can serve you in some way. So let's jump right into the interview. As I mentioned, I had the privilege and honor of interviewing Rob Daley, who's the CEO of 4 Moms. If you're unfamiliar with 4 Moms, they are a robotics company that makes high-tech baby gear, and they're absolutely incredible. If you haven't seen their gear for babies, I highly encourage you to check them out. You can check out all their products at 4Moms, the number 4, followed by moms.com. Again, that's 4moms.com. It's been incredible to see this company grow, and it's really cool that they're located, their headquarters are here in Pittsburgh. But it's just been an amazing thing to see their company grow and all the products that they're coming out with. And I really think that you'll be blessed by this interview with Rob. We talk about leadership and we talk about entrepreneurship. And Rob is a true entrepreneur. He's also a venture capitalist and definitely knows what he's talking about. So whether you're currently an entrepreneur, you want to start a company, you have an idea, this interview will really add value to your life. And if you want to connect with Rob, I've included ways to connect with him in the show notes at l3leadership.org/episode 102. And you can just find out everything that you need to there. So that being said, don't want to take up any more of your time. Let's jump right into the interview with Rob. Enjoy, and I'll be back at the end with a few announcements. Recording, but thank you so much, Rob, for being willing to do this interview. And why don't we just start with you just telling us about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Rob Daley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of 4 Moms, which is a company based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania that makes high-tech baby gear.
That's exciting. What's one thing about you that people would be surprised to know?
Oh, my goodness. That's going kind of deep awfully fast. Surprised to know about me. Well, I guess I was a television actor for a period of time in college.
Really?
That's kind of unique and different.
Do you still do any of that on the side?
No, time doesn't kind of allow for it.
Sure.
It was a hobby through school, and then life got in the way.
Got ya. When you think of success, who's the first person that comes to mind for you?
Goodness gracious. When I think of success, what's the first person that I think of? I guess the fact that I'm repeating the question means that I'm thinking about it more than I probably should. Man, I don't know that I can go into one person. It's elements, right? So there are things that people do that I think are admirable, but I don't know that I've got one person that kind of embodies all of those things, right? Like, I've got massive amounts of respect for the vision and bold path that Steve Jobs was able to forge at Apple, and that's just massively impressive. There are other things about his own personal style that are not my absolute favorite, but he's certainly one name that I think of.
Yeah. So can you give us a brief overview of 4 Moms and how you got to where you are? How did you get here?
Sure. So, excuse me, I'm a classically trained business guy and a closet engineer, and I've been longtime friends with Henry Thorne. So Henry's a world-leading roboticist and a closet business guy, and we had gotten to know each other oh gosh, probably in the late 1999 timeframe, something like that, and to become friends. And in 2004, I was thinking about starting a company and doing something different with my life. And I reached out to my friend Henry and had no idea that he was having the same kind of debates and questions on his side of things. So what I thought was going to just be a networking kind of idea bouncing kind of lunch turned into a V8 moment where I think we both said, if not with you, then with who? And we thought at the end of that lunch that we didn't know what the company was going to do, but that we'd actually go out and start a company together.
That's great. So I threw this out to people that are in our community. I said, what questions do you have? And someone said, as Four Moms has grown, what compromises have you had to make to grow the company, to get it to where it is today? And do you have any regrets with that? And then how do you incorporate those lessons learned into Four Moms?
So I think one of the lessons that we learned really early on was this idea that there's one chance for a first impression. And what that means is that trying to continue to focus on what's right as opposed to getting distracted by all of the other pressures that can get in the way. So to be really specific about that, there was a point in time when we were getting ready to ship our first infancy, which is a product called the Monterey. And it was end of summer. The product was a few months late. The business was generating $1.8 million in revenue at the time, something like that. We were still very small. We were really counting on that seat. And when we went into early production, when we went into early production, there was a change in the dynamic of the product where it sounded like there was a cat trapped inside it. It sounded awful. It made a really, really bad noise from time to time. And we were faced with a tough decision. We had massive amounts of pressure to get that product shipping. We didn't have a lot of cash in the bank. We didn't have a lot of other momentum in the business. But we felt that the product wasn't as good as it could be or as good as it needed to be. So we made a hard decision and we said we're going to wait 90 days, we're going to fix these problems, and we're going to ship it 3 months late. And that 3 months turned into 6 months. And in that 6-month time frame, our main product that was being sold in Babies R Us stores wound up being pulled from Babies R Us stores. So there was a huge amount of stress and pressure around what was happening with the business. And we were running out of cash, and we were in the process of fundraising. But we held on to this vision for the idea that the first one chance to make a first impression and how important it is to maintain your single view of who you are, which in our case was making massively innovative stuff that was really, really high quality. And we waited, and we didn't ship until we knew we were absolutely ready. And that product today it's been in the market for 6 years now, I think is the time frame. And we'll sell something like, 190,000, 200,000 of them this year. And if we had caved to the short-term pressure that was kind of swirling around us and had made the wrong compromises, I've got absolute confidence that the product would not be the success that it is today.
Wow. I'm curious on a personal level, so I'm sure you've had to grow in your leadership. What are some of the personal challenges that you've had to overcome to lead at the scale that you guys are at today?
Yeah, sometimes people ask me, what's the hardest part? And I think the answer is been the same, which is all of them. When you're a small business, you've got no resources, and the risk is huge, and that's a really big challenge. And I think that, the biggest surprise for me has been that as the business has grown, that it never actually becomes easy. So when there were, 4 of us and a dream and, a few products in the market and trying to get things started, we lived every day on this massively risky front where you knew that every 30 or 60 days there was something coming up that the future of the business kind of hung in the balance. A meeting with a retailer that if it went poorly, things could end, or an engineering challenge or whatever it was. And you get to a point where you grow past that. And my presumption back then was that we'd get to a point that we would be big enough, that we'd have enough resources, that all of that risk would change, and then everything would be easy. And the reality is that the risk does change. It doesn't go away, right? I mean, General Motors can go through bankruptcy, anybody can. So it's not that you never get to a point where there's no risk in life. But there's just fundamentally different risk from a $1 million revenue business with 5 people to a business that's doing tens of millions of dollars in revenue with 170 people. But what I didn't anticipate was how at the beginning, although it's risky, it's massively simple. And what I mean by that is that you've got a few people and you're trying to do a few things, and everybody has their head around everything that's happening. And there aren't a lot of trade-offs that need to be made because you don't have resources to trade. And what happens as the company gets bigger is all of that changes. And the risk does start to dilute some and hopefully meaningfully. But what really changes is how exponentially complicated the business gets. So when you've got 160 people or whatever the number is, and you've got a large number of products, and you've got a large number of retailers and a large number of locations that you're kind of shipping to, trying to figure out what you need to do and how you need to prioritize, there are so many more knobs and dials, and there's so many more things that are involved. The machinery of the business is so much more complicated that it changes from this risk-oriented issue to this complexity-oriented issue. And neither one of them are actually easy.
Great answer. I love that. I'm curious. So you guys have a super cool office. It seems like you have a phenomenal culture. Obviously, I'm not in it day to day. But can you just talk about creating culture and then sustaining culture and the values that you want instilled as you've grown to 160 or however many employees you have today? Yep. What have you done as a leader to intentionally set that culture and sustain it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, philosophically, I don't think there's anything more important than culture. At the end of the day, a business is nothing more than its people, right? Like you've got a bunch of contracts locked in a filing cabinet somewhere that define your incorporation. But I've said on many, many occasions that one of the only things that I know for certain is that if we locked the doors to 4 moms today and didn't let anybody in, nothing would happen. Right? The only reason that anything happens is because people show up and do things. So if you want to get the best things to happen, the formula is actually pretty simple. You need to have the best possible team, and you need to provide the best possible environment. And those two things are very self-reinforcing. And if you have those two pieces in place, it's amazing how many problems solve themselves. So if culture is really important, the question winds up being, what do you do in order to manage that? And Henry and I have been massively focused on proactively building our culture from the very beginning. And it probably starts with the idea of making sure that you're hiring the right folks. So we have a whole culture interviewing process that's a part of our hiring. We're really focused on making sure that we're bringing the right people onto the team who are going to be additive to our community as opposed to destructive about it. And we've got these 8 words that we live by. All of them are really, really important. The first one and the last one, by their placement, are the most important. And the last one is be humble, work hard, and respect others. And that tenet is so important to who we are and everything that we do, because we want to collaborate and we want to be innovative. We want to have lots of different points of view and all sorts of stuff that lots of companies aspire to. But our feeling, our lessons learned has definitely been that the only way we can get to that point is by having folks that are both, working hard and being humble and respecting folks. And what I mean by that is that if we want to collaborate and get some engineers and some designers in the room and have both of them provide input into the development of a product, if either one of them believe that their point of view is the most important one, you're not going to get good collaboration. So I guess maybe to kind of bring a long story short, by focusing on hiring the right group of folks, setting the right tenor, and then being very specific about what you want your culture to be, I think it's been a huge differentiator for us and a big part of why we've been so successful.
Sure. What would you grade yourself on your success rate in hiring over the years? In the beginning, were you horrible at hiring and you hired half the right people, half the wrong? I know it's always a risk hiring someone, right?
Sure.
What have you learned about hiring that's helped you guys hire all-stars?
Mm-hmm. We continue to get better at it. It's inherently a human process, which means it's inherently imperfect. Excuse me. But I would say that, when we started Four Moms, neither Henry and I had ever built a company of this size. I would say in hindsight, we probably would have deserved 5 or 6 out of 10. Some of our best hires were some of our early hires, but being very honest about it, it's that we were lucky, as opposed to the fact that we knew what we were doing. And I particularly have faith that we were lucky because when we made some of our best hires that time frame, we also made some hires that were really, really poor. I would say that at this point, we've probably gotten to an area where I'd say we're in the 8.7 to 9.2 range. I think we're extraordinarily good at it. And it's because it's something that we involve the entire company in. So if we're going to hire somebody in accounting, there are tons of folks in accounting that are involved in that hiring process. But we also bring in lots of folks that know absolutely nothing about accounting that are just interviewing around these ideas of cultural fit to make sure that we've got the right person. And in addition to that, there's a whole lot that we do around onboarding and making sure that people understand not just what they're expected to do, but how they're expected to do it. And we spend a lot of time doing training and education around our culture as well.
That's cool. So if someone's listening to this interview and they're like, I would love to work at Four Moms, or just in an innovative company like this, what advice would you have to them if it was your kids and said, hey, if you want to get hired at a company that's growing at this rate, you need to be this to get noticed and even get in the room?
Yeah, I don't think it's about necessarily figuring out who you need to be. I think there's a question of whether or not any individual is a fit to any other organization. So I think companies have the personalities of corporations, companies, is as diversified as people, right? And just like no two people can be forced to be best friends, no company and a person joining that company can be forced to be good friends either. And I think that rather than focusing on this idea of what do you do to get the job, the advice that I frequently give is make sure that you're really understanding not just what you're going to do at work, but what the personality of the place is. And if you can find a place where the culture and the environment is the right fit to who you are, it's going to be such a natural and good symbiotic relationship that kind of works for everybody. And so I think that the most important advice when you're kind of going out looking for a job is finding a place that you really feel like you fit in. If you fit well, I think you'll do well.
That's good. Last question on the Four Moms side. How do you as a leader maintain focus on the future and not get caught up in the day-to-day where you're just working in the business as opposed to on the business?
Yeah, I think that that's just a question of maybe in some ways your own personal discipline as well as also some of your own personal predilections. I, by my nature, tend to gravitate towards kind of the bigger strategic questions and things. So on a Monday through Friday, I won't call it 9 to 5, maybe 9 to 7 basis, it's very easy for me to get caught up in here's the meeting I need to go to and here's the decision that needs to get made. But when it's the time outside of the meeting time frame, it's a compulsion for me to be thinking about what it is that's kind of coming next. And maybe some of that is driven by a healthy or unhealthy general fear, which is that I think the most important thing that I need to do is focus on all of the things that can go wrong. If I can eliminate the downside, the upside stuff can absolutely take care of itself. So I tend not to worry about things like, or spend too much time thinking about, oh my gosh, we've got this new product coming out, we're going to sell so much of it, it's going to be awesome, and all of our problems are going to be fixed. I tend to spend much more time thinking about, my gosh, that product's coming out, what are all of the things that we can think of that might go wrong, and how can we eliminate that stuff? And how can we bring risks under our own control? And if we do those things, if you eliminate the things that can cause stuff to go wrong, what you get left with are the things that can actually go right. So in terms of that idea of kind of managing that line between getting caught up in the day-to-day and thinking strategically, I think I'm just kind of naturally drawn to a lot of that stuff.
That's great. So I'm sure that you've gotten a platform as a result of what you guys have done here that reaches beyond just the business. How do you use the influence that you've been given due to your guys' success, just to give back to the world?
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't know that that's a mantle or a title that I think that we deserve. I don't think that we've gotten to that level of success yet. I think we're working hard towards it. That being said, our mission is twofold. First is to develop great juvenile products. The second is to build a great company. And when we say great company, what we mean is that we care about more than just financial success. So that's been a part of our mission from the very beginning. And so we have a effort here that we refer to as Four Moms Cares. And Four Moms Cares is all of our philanthropic stuff, and its charter is actually quite broad. So to tick off a few of those things, as a company it's an engineering-based company, we care a lot about encouraging kids in their education around science and math and technology. So we do robotics camps here, probably on average about 4 times a year, where we bring in groups of elementary school or middle school kids, and we treat them to a day of learning about and interacting with robots and doing a lot of hands-on stuff with kids around science and technology education. We donate units to nonprofits so that they can use them in their fundraising. So we'll give away several units a month, where folks wind up auctioning off our products in order to raise money for their nonprofits. We also have a list of charities that interact with people that, our business is baby products, so we work with charities that work with either parents or babies. So in Pittsburgh, the Lemieux Family Center and Children's Home, I don't know if I'm pronouncing the Lemieux Children's Home, is one example of that, where they provide care to medically fragile babies as they're transitioning from the hospital to the home. And we donate units to them on a continual basis to use in their delivery of care and to give to their patients to take home and use. We also, on an ongoing basis, do these things where we encourage our people in social media to send in and share their stories. We make donations to those people individually. I guess also another great example of one of the institutions we work with is Operation Shower, which is a group that provides baby showers for military families, generally in situations where one of the military spouses is overseas when there's a baby being born. And so they wind up holding showers to give those folks the products that they need, and we donate to them very aggressively. And there's lots of other stuff kind of beyond that, but that's a big part of it. Those are examples of what we do in Florence.
That's fantastic. I want to talk a few minutes about entrepreneurship. I know you spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs. It seems like everyone wants to be an entrepreneur nowadays. I'm just curious, first and foremost, what advice do you have for the guy out there that's like, I got an idea, it's the next big thing, I want to be the next big entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What advice do you find yourself giving over and over again to those people?
Yeah, I think the strongest advice that I have is that starting a company because you have an idea is a horrible concept. The reason to start a company is because you feel a compulsion that you have to be an entrepreneur and that you can't live unless you do that there's nothing else that you can possibly do. The reality is that when you start, whatever idea you have, in all likelihood, is just horrible. You don't know enough yet, but all ideas start out as bad ideas. You just don't know enough yet to recognize that they're bad. And the way that you get to a great idea is that you need to work through a lot of different bad ideas. So for me, I was an entrepreneur for the time that I was a little kid. So when I was 5 years old and I lost the money that I was supposed to use to buy Christmas presents for my family, I went out and I gathered rocks and I went door to door selling rocks to people. And when I was
sell a lot?
I did sell a lot, way more than my parents thought I would sell.
Nice.
And when I was in middle school, I made Christmas wreaths and I sold them. And when I was in high school, I mowed lawns and shoveled driveways and all that kind of stuff. So I had gotten to a point when I was 34, I guess, where I said to my wife, if I don't start a company now, I might never do it, and I can't live with myself. I would much rather do this and fail than wind up in a scenario where at some point I'm sitting in a rocking chair reflecting back at my life, thinking about what might have been. And being an entrepreneur is, you always read that it's hard. It's harder than that. It's totally not worth it in terms of any type of risk reward, mathematical kind of equation you would try to balance. So the only way that I think you get through it, and I think all of the entrepreneurs that I know that are successful kind of tend to gravitate towards the same message, which is that I just couldn't not do it. So I think that's the best reason to start a business.
Yeah. So for those who do, or I guess even those who don't, where do you see entrepreneurs missing it most often? They just keep making this same mistake over and over and over again.
Yeah, a great question. And for sure, the mistake that I see over and over again is folks getting really, really excited about part of the picture. And that, if I think about our business, for example, for a product to be successful, it has to be something that the consumer cares about, and it has to be manufacturable, and you have to be able to deliver it at cost, and it has to fit into a retail landscape. And there are a whole bunch of other things too that you've got to optimize on in terms of really delivering a product that's going to be successful. And I think there are tons of entrepreneurs, particularly when you have a specific expertise, that overweight around what they think is most important. And you say something like, man, this solution that I've come up with is super cool and really complicated. And there are very few people that could do this. And that's true, but you're not getting around perhaps the idea of, does anybody care, right? Or does that solve a problem? Or is the incremental level of complexity or uniqueness actually a magnitude better? Or is it just kind of more complicated? And I think that sometimes when you make this leap towards being an entrepreneur, it's because you've got this narrow view of expertise. You've got something that you're excited about, but you're not considering the broader picture, particularly outside of the things you don't know as well. And you've got to get everything right if you're going to succeed.
That's good. I was interviewing Sean Amorati last week, and he just talked about the importance of getting feedback and how he encourages his students at CMU to actually go to Panera, and they pitch their idea to 5 people, right? And so can you talk about the importance of pitching, and what advice do you have for young entrepreneurs that have the idea, but actually getting feedback to see if their idea is actually something that the market wants? And not to be sensitive around getting feedback and falling in love with your idea.
Yeah, for sure. The most important thing around feedback is to make sure you're not just looking for people to tell you what you want to hear, right? You've got to be open to listen. So we've been massively focused on third-party feedback and research from our earliest days at Four Moms. To maybe simplify the earlier comment and build on what you're saying, it is way easier to sell things that people want to buy as opposed to trying to get people to buy the things that you want to make. So don't just make things that you want to make and hope people will buy them. Make the stuff that folks actually want. That's true whether it's a product or a service or what have you. So it's funny, Sean Amorati is a friend, and I don't know if his Panera reference was a specific or a general one, but a story that's been told about Four Moms' early research from back in the day is that long before we had a product or had a company and we just had ideas we were trying to vet, we needed to get access to groups of moms so we could talk to them about these product ideas that we had. And so I went to the Galleria at South Hills Village and went into a Gymboree class 15 minutes before it started and said to the instructor that I would give them $20 if they would let me make an announcement at the end of class. Nice. And the Gymboree instructor was like, sure. So at the end of the class, I said that we were having a meeting upstairs in Panera and that we had these new products that were targeted towards babies that we wanted to get feedback on. And if anybody from the class had time, they could come upstairs, we'd buy them lunch and give each of them, I don't remember, it was $20 or $30 to participate in the study. And we wanted to get 5 moms to come up and do that. And so I went upstairs and waited, and 2 moms showed up, which hardly seemed like enough. So we got them started on their lunch, and then I went out into the hallways of the mall and started looking around for moms with strollers that were talking to each other. And I went up to these women who were engaged in some form of conversation with the somewhat creepy invitation of, excuse me, can I buy you lunch? But kind of explaining that there was this thing happening in Panera, and if they had some time, I'd be happy to pay them for their time and buy them lunch. I don't know, I probably got 6 dirty looks, 3 quizzical stares, and 3 people actually came and joined the study. So I've used that example a lot in talking with entrepreneurs around how it's not about going out and hiring research firms and doing something that's big and fancy. It's about rolling up your sleeves and getting your hands dirty and being gritty and dragging some people out of a shopping mall into Panera and sitting them down around a table and saying, what do you think? And it kind of starts from there.
That's cool. I'm just curious, in your experience, how many founders, and can you talk about the role of a founding leader of an organization? I mean, how often is it, when you see founders who aren't able to scale the company, but they had the skill set to start it, do you see that as something that's consistent? And if they're not able to scale it, is it usually just an issue of their personal growth, and they are not able to grow with the company, or they just have a skill set for starting things and they should hand things off?
Yeah, so for sure, I think one of the things that's been massively surprising to me is how the skills that are required to be successful have changed so dramatically, even over our short, arc so far. And so I think there are some people that naturally gravitate towards different elements of what is required to be successful. The guy who's comfortable walking around, the Galleria Mall and grabbing moms by the shirt collar and saying, I want to come, talk to you, is a very, very different skill set, or what you're doing in that job. Like when I was the CEO of 4 Moms and I was doing that, I don't do that anymore, right? Yeah. Now my job is much more about trying to manage teams and provide encouragement and make sure that we've got the right people in the right places. So I think there are some folks that have particular anchors around the things that they like to do and the things that they're good at. I think there are other people that are a little bit more fluid in terms of embracing different aspects in that journey. So I think it's a very kind of individual by individual thing.
Yeah. Have you enjoyed every
I have. It's been, there are, like anything else, there are pros and cons, right? Like it was a ton of fun and really exciting when there was a small group of us, and every week there was this kind of big thing that was happening where you got kind of energized and were kind of propelled forward. I also back then spent, 6 consecutive weekends making Home Depot runs and doing the carpentry for our trade show booth, right? Because I had to design and build our trade show booth, right? Designing and building trade show booths wasn't fun. That wasn't what I wanted to do, right? Now we've got people who do all of that stuff. So there's an element of what I did before that I missed. There's an element of what I'm doing right now that's awesome. When I look at folks, entrepreneurs that have like really, really built something, really done stuff that's just amazing. You look at Bezos, or Gates. And I saw a great 60 Minutes with Bezos where he talked about when they were starting Amazon, and at the end of the day, every day, he would load up the boxes into his Honda Accord and he'd drive them to the post office and put them in the mail. I could totally relate to that, right? Like I remember that part of being an entrepreneur. And then he was talking about these, 96 data centers, distribution centers they have, with all of the computerized conveyors and big sophisticated systems and all of this, complication around the physical infrastructure and the people that are doing it. And I think, I don't know how you get from point A to point B, right? And I'm at point A2, right? Because there's certainly a lot of things now that back then I would have never imagined how we get to. But how someone like him is able to continue to lead the organization as it changes from one phase to another, there aren't very many people in the world who can do that. Yeah. That's pretty special.
Very special. Well, as we wrap up, a few personal questions that are fun. Well, I guess there's one more serious question because I always like asking this. And again, I don't know what your financial career or financial life was like prior to 4 Moms, but what have you learned about money? So many young people were like, I want to be a billionaire, I want to be a millionaire. What have you learned just about money in life, and what advice do you have to young people when it comes to the pursuit of money and what money can actually do for you?
Yeah, I think you're most successful when you're not pursuing pursuing it. Right. I think that if you go out kind of looking for money, I think that it's going to be a massive disappointment. Making money is actually unbelievably hard work. And if the reward is intended to be money unto itself, it's not going to justify its means. You're not going to be able to actually work as hard as you need to. The work that I do here at For Moms, when I wake up in the morning, I don't think about the paycheck that I'm getting. Right? I'm energized by the work that I do. The money kind of all follows. And, early in my career, I was working in the finance industry, and I had an opportunity to continue in the investment banking world, and had a really, really, really lucrative offer, and made a change to go do something in venture capital instead. And my current comp was like half, but it was what I wanted to do. And I've never regretted those types of decisions. I think you got to do what you love.
Yeah, I love that answer. So I'm not sure if you're a reader, but if you are, what books do you find yourself giving away most often, or what do you give away most often?
Yeah, no, I'm a big reader. Gosh, I usually get the "What did you read last?" The "What do I give away most often?"
You can answer that too.
No, that's cool, because it's an interesting take on it, because we have a library here that's full of books, and I'm frequently going down there and grabbing copies. Most recently, the two books that I've been giving away the most copies of are "Start with Why" by Simon Sinek, where the principle of the book is that people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And it speaks to thinking about how you motivate your team and even how you engage with your customers. And so that's a favorite of mine. He actually also has a fantastic TED Talk on the same topic. And then the other book that I've been using a lot is called Turn the Ship Around, which is a story of a Navy then commander who became admiral, who took control of the worst performing submarine in the U.S. Navy. And because he was in such desperate straits, he was forced into desperate measures and really rethought everything about military leadership, and winds up taking the boat from worst to first. Wow. Right? And it's generally around the idea that top-down management and hierarchy doesn't work. You need to have distribution of decision-making and responsibility, because the ideas of the many are way better than the ideas of the few. So those are two favorites of mine.
Love it. If you had to have coffee with your 20-year-old self, what would you tell them?
I think that it would probably, we do a yearbook here every year, and for a couple of years in a row, my yearbook quote was the same. And that's an Albert Einstein reference that says, of the millions of things that I've worried about in my life, almost none of them have come true. And that's one that I like to try to hold on to, which is that I think we all can be prone to spending way too much time worrying about stuff that just doesn't happen, and letting go of all of that worry and just kind of getting on with with being present is a much better way to be.
Up to this point in your life, out of everything you've done and accomplished, what are you most proud of?
I guess I'm fortunate that picking one might be a little bit hard. I've got two great kids. That's amazing. So I'm massively proud of that. Where it comes to For Moms, what I'm hands down the most proud of is the team of people that we have and the culture that we've built. I think that the reason we're going to continue to be successful is because of those two things first and foremost. So I'll put those two out there.
Yeah. And then last actual question, then I'll just leave it open-ended if you have any advice. But one day looking back on your life, what do you want to be remembered for?
Remembered for? I don't know. I think that I spend more time just thinking about what it is that I want to accomplish. I think that for me, one of the things that's been most important from the time that I was quite young was that I wanted to make sure, I still want to make sure, that my life just matters. Nobody gets out of here alive, right? You get to the end and it's all going to be over. And I just want more than anything to make sure that when that time comes for me, the time frame that I was actually here actually made a difference. And not in I'm not going, my life isn't about feeding the poor or, eradicating homelessness. And I think those are great things. That's just not what I'm naturally good at. So when I say making a difference, I don't mean that. I just mean that I want to have left my fingerprints here. I want my life to have mattered. I want to have changed something. I want people to have been influenced in a positive way based on the fact that I was here somehow. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I would argue you're doing that every day here, so thank you.
Well, we've got a lot of work to do, but thanks.
And then just open-ended, if you had to give any advice, or do you want to leave any advice for young leaders?
Yeah, so it's a fair question. I'm on the faculty at CMU, and I lecture from time to time down at UVA and some other places from time to time. And I frequently end with those presentations with a collection of quotes of things that I've learned. One of them is the Einstein quote about the things that you worry about tend not to come true. In that list, I've got my own quote, which I guess maybe I can share, which is that I think fear is the greatest impediment to success. And that is that it is so easy to sit on the couch and live in your own comfort zone, and that's not where great things ever happen. And that what you need to do is get up off the couch. You've got to push yourself into a place that feels really uncomfortable and take those chances. And that if you let it, fear will be the biggest impediment to being successful. And you need to not let that happen.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time, Rob. This was fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Everyone, thank you so much for listening to my interview with Rob. I really hope that it added value to your life. Again, for ways to connect with Rob and what 4Moms is doing, you can go to the show notes at l3leadership.org/episode 102. I would just want to invite you a quick announcement here for L3. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, we're hosting a Pirates game and tailgate party with Sean Ammirati, who I recently interviewed for the podcast, on Monday, June 20th. It's $10, and everyone who comes, you'll get into the Pirate game. You're going to get Chick-fil-A as a part of the tailgate party. Sean's going to be giving a talk on his book, and everyone's going to get a free copy of his book as well, and Sean's willing to sign those as well. And that event is sponsored by the Pittsburgh Kids Foundation, and really hope that you can join us that night. It's going to be a lot of fun. We have 100 tickets available, and there's less than 40 available now. So really encourage you, if you want to come on out. You can get more information at l3leadership.org/pirates, and hopefully we'll get to see you at the event. As always, I want to thank our other sponsor, 068, which is an incredible company led by my friend Daniel Bull. And Daniel's been a past speaker at our breakfast series, and you can listen to his talk and his story about 068 at l3leadership.org/episode 75. And he essentially started a company that starts companies with ex-convicts, and it's just incredible what they're doing. And you can learn more about that and see actual stories of people who have started companies that work for Daniel at 068, all spelled out, .org. Again, that's 068.org. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast today, really appreciate it if you leave a rating and review and subscribe to it on iTunes or Stitcher. That really helps us out, and I really appreciate it. And as always, if you want to stay up to date with what we're doing, you can simply sign up for our email list at our website at l3leadership.org, and you'll start to get email about upcoming events, podcast episodes, blog posts, etc. And we hope that we can add value to your life. As always, I like to close with a quote, and I really love this quote by William Feather. He said, "Success seems to be largely a matter of hanging on after others let go." Success seems to be largely a matter of hanging on after others let go. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, I find that quote to be very, very fitting, and I think Rob would agree with that as well. So thank you for listening and being a part of L3 Leadership. Laura and I appreciate you so much, and we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next episode.